Hi, this is Duke Ralston from the Reaper's Digest. I want to thank you for listening to the show, and I wanted to ask you to buy the Reaper's Digest a cup of coffee. Just go to Ko-fi.com/tennessemacabre and send us a tip. Thank you again.
Welcome to a night.
Hello and welcome to the Reaper's Digest. This episode, we're going to dive in to the various cinematic treatments of Dracula. We're going to start with some that are pretty much canon. And in the next show, we'll do some theme and variation. My name is Duke Ralston. I play the Grim Reaper on Tennessee Macabre. And you can catch Tennessee Macabre on Vimeo, on our Vimeo channel, of course, ITV Chattanooga, Betamax TV, the Monster Channel, and the Vortex. My co-host is
Blake Ray. I am the lead singer from Blood Oaks. I am a horror enthusiast, a horror writer. My band Blood Oaks is currently cutting an EP. Should be done very soon. Coming out on Academic Punk Records.
Excellent. Can't wait. Can't wait to hear it.
Me either, man. It's been a long time in the making.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah. So, question for you.
Yes.
What is your favorite Dracula movie?
Oh, okay. Canon. If we're going by a Dracula movie that sticks pretty much to canon, I like Bram Stoker's Dracula from, I believe, 1993.
Yeah.
Of course, there are some things that I dislike about the 1931 Dracula with Bela Lugosi.
Mm-hmm.
But Bela Lugosi is Dracula.
Absolutely.
So I can't leave that one out. And I also have a thing for the Spanish version of that film. So,
I was doing a little research into that. And, man, that Spanish version filmed right at the same time.
Yeah.
Really was cool,
It's a very cool movie. But let's start at the starting place.
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
start with the film that launched 1,000 films. And Nosferatu. It's a century old this year. There are various dates out there as to its actual release. So let's just say it's a century old. One of the things that I really love about this movie is that it is a totally pirated movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, really sets the stage for guys like Ed Wood later on.
Yeah. It's very psychedelic in its way.
Yes.
I don't know. Let's go a little bit into the background of the movie, because it's not quite... Well, I'll give you a summary. How about that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because it's not exactly the same as the book.
Part of that is literary, and part of that is for legal purposes, because they were trying to avoid copyright infringement. They failed.
Yeah,
but they tried.
Yeah, who was it? It was Stoker's widow that sued?
Stoker's widow sued and won, and all copies of the film were supposed to be destroyed. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Yeah, because and we're glad it did.
We're real glad it did.
Yeah. So basically, in 1838, In this fictional German town, Hutter is sent to Transylvania by his employer, an estate agent named Knock, to visit a new client named Count Orlok, who plans to buy a house across from Hutter's own home. While embarking on his journey, Hutter stops at an inn where the locals become frightened by the mere mention of Orlok's name. Hutter rides on a coach to the castle where he's welcomed by Count Orlok. When Hutter is eating dinner and accidentally cuts his thumb, Orlok tries to suck the blood out, but his repulsed guest pulls his hand away. Hutter wakes up the morning after to find fresh punctures on his neck, which he attributes to mosquitoes. The whole time he's writing letters back to his fiancée, and he talks about the mosquitoes in that letter. That night, Orlok signs the documents to purchase the house and notices a picture of Hutter's wife, Ellen, remarking that she has a lovely neck. Bum, bum, bum. So Hutter starts reading a book about vampires they took from the local inn, and he begins to suspect that Orlok is one. He cowers in his room as midnight approaches with no way to bar the door. The door opens by itself and Orlok enters. Hutter hides under the bed covers and falls asleep. Meanwhile, his wife awakens from her sleep in a trance, walks onto the balcony's railing, which gets his friend Harding's attention. When the doctor arrives, she shouts out her name, apparently able to see Orlok in his castle threatening her unconscious husband, or fiance. The next day, Hutter explores the castle only to retreat back into his room after he finds the coffin in which Orlok is resting. Hours later, Orlok piles up coffins on a coach and climbs into the last one before the coach departs. Hutter rushes home after learning this. The coffins are taken aboard a schooner, or a two-masted schooner, they specify, where all the ship's sailors and captain die and Orlok takes control. When the ship arrives in the Weisberg, Orlok leaves unobserved, carrying one of his coffins and moves into the house he has purchased. Many deaths in the town follow after Orlok's arrival, which the town's doctors blame on an unspecified plague. In the version I watched, they mentioned it was the Black Plague, but it's not sort of said exactly.
Right.
So Ellen reads the book Hutter found, which claims that a vampire can be defeated if a pure-hearted woman distracts him with her beauty. She opens her window to invite Orlok in, but faints. Hutter revives her and she sends him to fetch the professor. After he leaves, Orlok enters and drinks her blood, but starts as the sun rises, causing Orlok to vanish in a puff of smoke. Ellen lives just long enough to be embraced by her grief-stricken husband. So, the last scene is Orlok's castle being destroyed. I love this movie.
I love it too.
Yeah. I will say, I'm watching it for the umpteenth time the other day. Who was it that played Orlok? Was it Matt Schreck? Yeah, Matt Schreck.
Yeah.
His expressions sometimes are a little silent movie for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you know what I mean, they're over exaggerated.
Right. They are. But the settings of this movie, the Gothic settings, I don't think anybody has ever really equaled the sets on this movie.
No. And the attention to detail with the shadows and the chiaroscuro shading.
Yes. Was it German Expressionism? Is what they called it.
Yeah.
And those early German Expressionist horror films, just, if there are no actors on the set and you sit and watch these things for 20 minutes, you'd be creeped out.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it is a creepy set. And then Orlok himself, the makeup and the treatment of the vampire is very much faithful to Bram Stoker's book. And that is the scariest vampire that has ever graced the stage.
I would say he's definitely up there.
Yeah.
Definitely up there.
Well,
I will get to Christopher Lee in Horror of Dracula.
Yeah.
I would say he's in the running too.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of scary.
It is.
Orloff is a repulsive scary.
He's otherworldly.
He's otherworldly. Christopher Lee. We'll get to Christopher. Let's get to Christopher Lee in a minute, because you're absolutely right. I mean, Christopher Lee is an imposing, intimidating figure.
Absolutely.
And he brings a cold aloofness to Dracula that Bela Lugosi and Orloff neither one could bring to it.
Well, I would say that these 3 films break down into 3 basic interpretations of the threat.
Yeah.
Nosferatu is the threat of plague.
Yes.
You know, he's constantly associated with rats.
Yeah.
It's called Nosferatu, which does mean the plague bringer.
Yep.
His makeup is very rodent-like.
Very rodent-like, yeah.
With the 2 front teeth that are elongated.
Yeah.
The big ears.
Yeah.
You know, for some reason, the baldness makes me think of a rodent.
Hey.
Weird.
It's a little close to home. Although I will say that I first started shaving my head to do the Grim Reaper because of Max Schreck's Orloff.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and it works.
It works. Yeah, it works.
It works. It works. But definitely he's the plague.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
I would say that Bela Lugosi is sexual.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's a sexual horror. It is the fear of the incubus, the seducer, the ruiner of chastity. And I would say that Christopher Lee is the predator.
Yes.
He's the fear of the big cat.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about Bela Lugosi and the 31 Dracula.
All right.
You know, when you are a kid and you're playing monster, you try to imitate Bela Lugosi.
Absolutely.
That is the ultimate success of the 1931 Dracula. Now, here is my issue with the 31 Dracula. I love Bela Lugosi. I think he did a great job. And they said that Bela Lugosi would stand in front of a mirror saying, "I am Count Dracula," you know, over and over again. And his Hungarian accent, of course, was impeccable because it was real.
Yeah.
I think Edward Van Sloan was an incredible Van Helsing. Sloan is an actor of the period, and there are some things that are a little bit overdone and over-exaggerated, but all in all, he is makes a great Van Helsing.
Dwight
Fry. Oh my gosh.
Renfield.
Dwight Fry. That Renfield, there is no other Renfield. That's Dwight Fry, man. When he comes up out of the hold of that boat. And that to me is almost scarier than Dracula.
In a lot of ways it is.
Yeah. I mean, it really is that's the threat that these guys see when they open the boat. And man, he is scary.
Yeah. So a little bit of that madness playing into it.
Yes. Yes.
You know?
And they really emphasize that. Now, here's my problem with the 31 Dracula.
What's that?
David Manners, Helen Chandler, they're okay.
Yeah.
But they're not great.
Limp.
Yeah, little limp. And both of them took it. It was just a job to them. They were not particularly enthralled, which is ironic because David Manners did a lot of the Universal horror movies, but he was not enthralled by them. They were just jobs.
Yeah.
So I do have a little bit. To me, that's a little bit of a letdown in the 31 Dracula. But I'm gonna. What's something else that you notice about the 31 Dracula?
The eyes.
The eyes, yes, the eyes.
Which they're taking from. Now, White Zombie predates Dracula, right?
No, it's after it.
It is after it?
It's after it, yes.
But his eyes are so intense always.
Yes. His eyes are intense. Even when you look at Bride of the Monster, which is one of the last movies he did, he's got that. Those eyes are intense. The rest of him looks like a sick old man, which is what he was. But his eyes were intense, you know? But, okay, one of the things, and this is in the book, but the Universal movie, to me, emphasizes it more. You are in the Carpathian Mountains, and it is Renfield that you see going to Castle Dracula.
Yeah.
And it is like you're in the Carpathian Mountains in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Lanterns, horse and buggy, very, very 1800s, very, you know. But then you come forward to London, and it's 1931 London.
Yeah. Very much the modernity versus.
Yes. Heavily emphasized.
Rusted.
I think even more emphasized than Bram Stoker emphasized it.
Well, I think that's because of the time.
Yeah.
You know, you have a time where traditionalism is getting stripped away.
Yes.
You know, and between the World Wars and the Great Depression, people have a very bleak aspect of outlook on humanity at that point.
Yes, they did. They really did.
And you see that in this.
You see it, yes. Dracula is very much, there's a very much a sexuality to Dracula. To me, there seems to be a lack of sexuality in Helen Chandler.
I would say the main source of sexuality is Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's a killer.
Well, he's the kind of dangerous man that you come to expect.
Yeah.
In that he is wearing a coat and tails.
Mm-hmm.
He is rich. He is an outsider.
Yes.
And because of this becomes a very threatening entity.
Yes. Yes. The wealthy outsider, the aristocrat.
Yes.
There is something.
And this is a time where people didn't trust the rich.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
I mean, why would you? But
I think there is something very threatening in an English film, and to a certain extent in an American film. Even in America, we have some familiarity with British aristocracy.
We sort of inherited it.
Sort of inherited. There's something very threatening about an aristocracy that is not British.
Yeah.
You know, and this is this count from Transylvania that nobody knows. He's an unknown quality.
Yeah, he is completely unknown. He is from the outside.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting portrayal. It really is.
It really is. And I'm gonna kind of delve into the Spanish version here. It's almost like what the English version lacks, the Spanish version has. Because in the Spanish version, you have Lupita Tovar. And there is a lot of feminine sexuality mean, it's a very hot film.
Yeah. Especially, this was pre-code.
Yes, it was pre-code.
Yeah, so.
And Tovar was a very attractive woman, and she brought a lot of warmth and female sexuality to the role. Whereas Helen Chandler didn't.
She wasn't terrible.
She wasn't terrible. I don't mean that she was a bad actress, but I don't feel like there was kind of an iciness, I think, about her, an aloofness. And Lupita Tovar doesn't have that, to me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Now the Dracula, the guy that played Dracula, Spanish, he was no competition for Bela Lugosi. But one of the neat things about the Spanish version of the film is the Spanish version of the film was shot at night. So these guys would come to the Universal lot during the day when the English production was being shot. They would watch the English-speaking actors run their lines and run through the takes, and then they would shoot the same takes that night, and they'd already seen them run. And so
they had a bit of an advantage.
They had an advantage, yeah. They could put the film together much better than the guys that were shooting it today because they'd already seen, 5-10 takes of this scene, and they knew what they wanted to do and how they wanted to play it.
Yeah.
And that showed. That does show.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's always a little easier to go second.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Now, some of the things that I think are important, I think that Van Helsing gets established in the 31 Dracula as very important. And Edward Sloan kind of creates this role in Van Helsing. I mean, he takes the material that Stoker wrote, okay? But you get this role, and he plays it in The Mummy, too. Essentially, his role in The Mummy is Van Helsing. He's the educated occultist who is there to help. But that becomes kind of a character we see in a lot of movies up to the present day. And it has its roots, I think, in the 1931 Dracula.
Yeah. I think this, of the three we're talking about today, is the most faithful adaptation.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. There are a few differences, I think. Of course, they don't follow Dracula back to Transylvania. It's Renfield that goes to Castle Dracula instead of Parker. There's some differences that, I think they did to make the movie shootable because they shot much shorter movies back then. I don't know what the runtime is on this movie, but it's a little over an hour.
Yeah.
So they didn't have near
75 minutes.
75 minutes, okay. So they didn't have near the time to work with that you see in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Or even in Nosferatu.
That's
clocks in at about an hour and a half.
Yeah. So it's a much shorter movie, so they had to make it fit that 75-minute time frame.
Yeah. It was an interesting one. Now, the Hammer Dracula.
Oh, yeah.
Horror of Dracula in the U.S.
Oh.
Had Christopher Lee as Dracula and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing.
Yes.
And their adversarial relationship is key.
Yes.
To the film.
And it's key to Hammer horror and probably key to British horror from 1950 to 1972.
Yeah.
It becomes Cushing brings a lot to that role. It's a very different take, I think, than Edward Van Sloan. Cushing is much more Van Sloan looked like an old man. He wasn't, but he looked like an old man. Cushing looks like a much younger man in the Horror of Dracula. He is much more capable of fighting. He's much more physical. And then, of course, Christopher Lee. Oh my gosh.
He's a much more physical threat than the other two.
Much more physical threat. Christopher Lee is deadly.
Yeah, you get the feeling that Dracula, if he doesn't drink your blood, will just rip you apart.
Yes. Which, if you know anything about Christopher Lee, he could very well do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know he had a metal band later?
Yeah. Christopher Lee, let's just take a moment to discuss a little bit about Christopher Lee. First of all the people that played Dracula, Christopher Lee is actual aristocracy.
Yeah.
He is the son of an Italian contessa. Was at one time engaged to the, I think, a Swedish princess. Either Swedish or Norwegian. I think Swedish princess. Christopher Lee was a Nazi hunter, member of the British Army, may have been part of the SAS, would never admit to it. Famously, Peter Jackson, during The Hobbit, looked up at Christopher Lee and said, "Try to imagine what it sounds like when you plunge a dagger into a man's back." And Christopher Lee yelled back down, "My dear Peter, I don't have to imagine." Oh. As you mentioned, he also had a metal band, played some pretty cool songs.
Yeah.
Christopher Lee, I think, was 6'2". He was physically imposing. And he brought a kind of almost reptilian coldness to Dracula.
Yeah. Especially with the red contacts, the blood, the big fangs.
Yes. Hammer horror brought a lot. There was a cycle. You had the cycle at Universal Films that started in 31, and it runs to the mid-40s, and then the Universal monsters kind of get paired off against Abbott and Costello, and they're sort of a joke, and American cinema goes away from the Gothic monsters. Hammer horror brings them roaring back in 58. What they do is they take, first of all, they shoot them in Technicolor.
Gotta love it.
You gotta love it. You see real blood. There's real blood in Dracula. The sets are luscious. Okay. The costuming was incredible. And they had most of them had some really good writers. Famously, the next Dracula movie that Christopher Lee did in the Dracula series, and I can't remember the name of it, he has no lines. And it wasn't that he had no lines. He just told Hammer that his lines were so silly he was not going to use them.
That was Dracula, Prince of Darkness.
Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and he doesn't speak.
1966.
1966. Yeah. And but for the most part, Hammer's writing was spot on.
Yeah. And I love the later Hammer Draculas too.
I do too.
Satanic Rites of Dracula.
My favorite. AD 72, one of my favorites.
Yeah. Taste the Blood of Dracula.
Yes.
Now, you know what I did not know?
What's that?
The Legend of Seven Golden Vampires, that vampire kung fu film?
Yeah.
That's a Hammer movie.
That's the last of the Hammer Draculas, yes.
Yeah.
Christopher Lee refused to do it. Peter Cushing does have a role in it, but I don't think he's Van Helsing. But yeah, it's actually, I like the movie.
I do too. But I'm a sucker for vampires and kung fu movies.
Yeah.
So you mash them together and I'm a happy boy.
It's an irresistible combination. But I think you have to give Hammer some credit because they took the vampire. Part of what happens, I think, when you go back and you look at Universal did a great job of creating sequels to Frankenstein, The Mummy. Some people might disagree with me on that, but I love all the Universal Mummy movies.
I'm the one who would disagree.
You don't like the Mummy movies?
I find them. The first one's good.
Yeah.
The first one's good. The subsequent ones I find a little hard to watch.
Okay, I understand.
They're just
It's
the pacing.
an acquired taste.
Pacing.
Yeah. But there's no arguing the fact that they were successful. Okay.
Yeah.
Universal had a very hard time They had a very hard time with doing Dracula sequels.
And it's a pretty wrapped up story.
It's a pretty wrapped up story, and once you've told it, it's hard to come back. They tried The Daughter of Dracula, and I liked the movie. It's not the first thing I think of when I think of a Dracula movie, though.
I like the song a lot better.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a good song.
Screaming Lord Such.
Yes. Dracula's Daughter.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, though, Dracula's Daughter does start to hint at some lesbian themes.
Which is something we'll get into when we get into the Carmilla movies and stuff at one point.
Yeah. Yes. But that's where you first start to see that is in The Daughter of Dracula. Son of Dracula with Lon Chaney Jr. Just, I don't think it has, it's not a very, it just doesn't work, Hammer, on the other hand, is able to make 7 movies.
Yeah.
And
like that.
And it's because they were willing to break new ground with the script, I think. They were not afraid to come up with some crazy way to bring Dracula back from the grave. Most of the movies, it was Christopher Lee that came back from the grave, so that Christopher Lee becomes, synonymous with Dracula.
Yeah.
And Peter Cushing comes back as Van Helsing in most of the movies. And they actually have some pretty interesting ways to bring him back. In the Satanic Rites in Dracula AD 1972, it's actually Abraham Van Helsing's great-great-grandson that faces Dracula, and it becomes a family curse.
And that's something you see coming down the line, too.
Yeah.
Even in other adaptations across genre.
Yeah.
Like, are you familiar at all with the Castlevania video game series?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the Belmonts are the stand-in for the Van Helsings.
Exactly.
So.
And they face, you have that video game that's built around it. There was a comic book series in the 70s, and I loved the comic book series when I was a kid. I don't come anywhere close enough to remember it well enough to talk about it, except at one point, Dracula was going by the name Alucard.
Yep.
Yeah. But it was a pretty good series.
Alucard, of course, being Dracula spelled backwards.
Yes. An anagram, as it were. So there's a lot of there's been a lot of theme and variation on this topic.
Yeah.
Now, you want to take a moment to talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Let's save it.
Let's
save it for next week.
Okay. I have a hard time holding off on Winona Ryder. So
I have the restraining order to prove that.
As soon as it expires, I will ask her out again.
Oh, it's just coffee. Come on. No, I was thinking, I wanted to go back and talk about some of the visual tropes you see starting to develop, even in Nosferatu.
Okay. Is there a lot of them that develop there?
Yeah. The idea of the shadows being so important.
Yes.
Reflection and casting of shadows.
Right.
Because that is super important. The most iconic image in Nosferatu is, of course, him going up the stairs with his shadow going before him.
Yes.
And I think that hints at that, what do you call it? The ephemeral nature of a plague.
Oh, yeah. It is ephemeral, and there's something very optical about a vampire, because the vampire cannot be seen in a mirror. The vampire doesn't cast a reflection. And that's always key. There's a lot of different, you get a lot of different interpretations of folklore, but that optical quality of not being able, there's something weird optically about a vampire.
Well, you know why they don't cast a shadow in a mirror?
To have no soul.
No.
What's that?
Mirrors used to be backed with silver. Silver is a holy metal.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Never thought about that.
Yeah, silver affects the vampire the same way it does most undead creatures of the night, blah, blah, blah. You know, in that they're not a fan.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, they don't cast a shadow, and that, or they don't cast a reflection, rather. And that becomes important in the 1931 Dracula. That's how they decide that Dracula is a vampire.
The cigarette case.
Yeah. So.
And that's
a cool sequence.
I was going to say, that's probably my favorite scene in that movie. Van Helsing opens that silver cigarette box, and there's no reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a cool scene.
Yeah.
You know what else is a cool scene?
What's that?
Nosferatu.
Yeah.
Is they're looking out the window, and you're looking down this tiny little German street, and it's real crowded, and they're carrying the coffins.
Yes.
And it's just this parade of coffins.
Right.
I just found it chilling, absolutely chilling.
Yes. It is a terrifying scene.
Yeah. That and marking the doors of the people who died.
Yeah. Of course, Central Europe has a much more intimate relationship, or did have a much more intimate relationship with the plague than we do, I think. But also, that's just a few years after the close of World War I. And tremendous. Germany lost a lot of soldiers, buried a lot of people in World War I, as did England and France.
Yeah.
So there is an intimacy with mass death that I think we have a difficult time understanding.
I think so, and I mean it was so. The death is on such a large scale in Nosferatu as compared to other adaptations.
Yes.
They talk about plague breaking out in towns. One thing I said as I was watching with my wife.
Yeah.
Or rather, she was playing on her phone and I was watching Nosferatu. I said to her, I said, man, he is insatiable.
Yeah. Yes.
He is just unstoppable.
There's definitely, and that's going back to that, there's definitely an animalistic quality about Count Orlok.
Yeah. But definitely the plague rodent kind of animalism.
Yeah.
Not like Christopher Lee's apex predator animalism.
No. It's more like Stephen King's interpretation in Salem's Lot.
Very much so.
vampirism as a plague.
Yeah. So I don't know. I can't get over how much I really enjoyed Nosferatu on a rewatch.
Yeah. It is one of the best movies ever made. There's a reason why we're watching it a century later.
Yeah.
And I will, there's a handful of movies, silent movies, that are, I don't think the silent movie carries well to the modern viewer because, number one, we're used to audio, but also there's a different style of acting that you have in silent movies because you're conveying everything with physicality.
Yeah.
And then the themes tend to be different. I mean, there's just a lot of differences.
It's a 100-year-old movie.
Yeah. There's only a handful of silent films that have any popularity today, and Nosferatu's one of them.
Most of the rest, if you'll think about it, are comedies.
Yeah. Freshman.
Charlie Chaplin, things like that.
Yeah. Dr. Caligari's Cabinet is another horror that does. I think Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney Jr. But that's
it's about it.
That's about it. The Freshman. So
I don't know that one.
It's Harold Lloyd and Joe Bynum Ralston.
Oh, okay. So,
but I mean, I'm not saying that it's remembered. I'm not saying it because it's Joe Bynum Ralston. I'm just saying that that's one of the comedies that people tend to watch.
Yeah. So, what do you think is your favorite version of Dracula out of these three?
Out of these three, I'm going to go with 31.
31? Your favorite Dracula?
That's my favorite.
No. I'm going to go with the Hammer. I like Christopher Lee.
I love Christopher Lee is my favorite Dracula actor.
Yeah.
But there's something about Dracula coming down that staircase.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's a scene we didn't talk about. There's something about that is just, I can't quite put my finger on it. I think they're trying to say something there. It is a huge staircase, and it is a sheer drop off the side. I've never in all my life seen an actual staircase like that.
Yeah.
But he's carrying Helen Chandler down that, and Renfield comes up and leads Van Helsing and Jonathan to him, and he kills Renfield and throws him down that staircase.
Yeah.
There's something about that scene that I love.
It's very visceral.
It's very visceral, yes. It's very visceral. And the opening scene where not the opening scene, but the scene where you first meet Dracula and he opens the door and welcomes Renfield to his castle. That to me is Saturday Night Shock Theater.
Yeah.
It's just where I first saw it,
Yeah.
And it is so there's a lot of nostalgia tied up for me. Yeah.
I think for me, the nostalgia's in the Hammer ones.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's my favorite era. Like, I love Hammer Studios. I especially like the 70s versions.
Yeah.
That's my favorite era of horror film in general, is 1970s.
Late 60s, early 70s. I agree.
Yeah.
I love that. And, we're going to talk more on theme and variation of Dracula later, but, Count Yorga, Blackula, some of the films that are very loosely based on Dracula that come out in the 70s are just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you want to wrap this up for now?
Let's wrap it up. Let's put a stake in it. And
put a pin in that and get back to it.
Put a pin in that. Next time, We're going to get into some theme and variation with some movies that take the Dracula premise and play with it.
Yeah, this is part of our series on film to movie adaptations.
Yes.
So,
and you have to wonder, did Bram Stoker? I mean, Bram Stoker was not. I mean, he did okay. He was a playwright. He had an incredible life. But when he wrote this, did he anticipate that it was going to be the novel that it is?
I've got to wonder that. Like, do you know? Is it like when a baseball player's pitching a perfect game?
Yeah.
And they know it's happening, but they don't talk about it?
Yeah. Or was it one of those things going, man, why am I wasting my time on this? Nobody's ever going to buy it. Yeah.
I personally have 3 copies, so.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at 2 as we speak.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, until next time, stay spooky, boys and girls.
Absolutely. And we will catch you on the flip side.
Thank you for choosing the Reaper's Digest podcast. Like and subscribe. Recommend us to your friends. Check us out on all social media outlets. We'll see you next time.